Hello, and welcome back to Scientific Biography, where we're going to talk about Isaac Newton, who kind of developed the theory of gravity for the first time and also invented calculus. So he was a pretty smart guy, did a lot of great things, and we're going to talk about some of his accomplishments today on the video. So let's get going. So Newton's background, he was born on Christmas Day in 1642, and as you can see here, his house still stands. This is the home he was raised in. It's now a museum, so you can go and visit it. His father, or his real father, died shortly after his birth, and Newton hated his stepfather, absolutely despised him. And he had a growing animosity towards his mother because she remarried, so he didn't really get along with his family too well. Newton went to the King's School in Grantham from 12 to 18, and then furthered his studies at Trinity College in Cambridge, starting in 1661. He was allowed to stay at Trinity College without being ordained with special permission from King Charles II. Trinity College was technically a religious school, and so you had to become ordained and join the ministry to teach there, but he got special permission not to because he was Isaac Newton. Newton was considered mostly a loner and spent a great deal of his life isolated from society and his peers, preferring to be alone with his books than with other people who could let him down. He did not take criticism well, and Robert Hooke, who criticized him a lot, kind of made him more reclusive. If it weren't for his friend Edmund Halley, who is the guy who the Halley's Comet is named after, he probably would have never published most of his important work, and we would have lost that to time. So let's talk a little bit about Newton's achievements. He was a great scientist, so let's talk about what he managed to do. First of all, he figured out but he figured out a mathematical way to represent gravity. He was inspired to discover this when an apple hit him in the head, and we don't actually know if that's true or not, but it's a tale that has yet stood the test of time. It's still talked about. That's kind of how we introduce this to kids. So it's something that people still think actually happened, but we're not actually sure that ever occurred or not. Like I said, he came up with a mathematical equation to represent gravitational forces, and he really figured out that gravity depends on the mass of the objects and the distance those objects are away from each other. So gravity increases the more mass there is, and depending on how close they are. Newton also invented the mathematical study of calculus in his work Principia Mathematica. It wasn't completely done and thought through all the way when he did it. No, much has been added to it since then, but in its simplest form, he basically created mathematical analysis. And the two major parts are, of course, differential calculus, which is the study of how rates change, and integral calculus, which deals with area and volume along functions. So he set the groundwork for calculus and got it going. And he pretty much did this in his spare time. It wasn't like he was just he just kind of decided to do this. Newton also worked with optics a lot. And he was one of the first people to see the color spectrum split by a prism. He ended up inventing a telescope that used mirrors instead of glass to magnify objects, which greatly increased the length at which you can see through a telescope. Like I said before, Robert Hooke heavily criticized Newton on his optical ideas, and that's what caused Newton to withdraw from the public. So he put all these ideas out about light and optics, and Robert Hooke didn't like that, so he criticized Newton, and that made Newton kind of withdraw from publishing things about his ideas. He also, obviously did a lot of celestial mechanics work, not just gravity, but he also worked at other things as well. He managed to combine his gravitational equations with Kepler's laws to show how gravity affects the motion of planets. And the work that Newton did laid the foundation for classical mechanics. And the Newton laws of motion are still accepted today. So he was able to make basically the beginnings of classical mechanics all the way back in the 1600s. Newton was also the first person to make an empirical calculation for the speed of sound. The speed of sound, right, is how fast sound travels. And seen to the right, these are planes breaking the sound barrier, or they're able to travel faster than sound. And so he was kind of the first person to think and do math about that. One other thing that Newton is well known for are Newtonian fluids, and it's basically just the simplest mathematical model of fluids that we know of. Newtonian fluids depend on viscosity and the shear rate, and water and air are considered Newtonian fluids. So those are kind of the things Newton based his ideas off. If you're into like fluid physics, Newtonian fluids are a big part of that. So something that you would need to know going into that realm of physics. Newton's legacy is large and great. He's heralded as one of the world's greatest scientists, and he's really aided in our understanding of the world. And he set up a lot of different things for future scientists to shoot for and then expand upon. His work created the framework for classical physics and mechanics, and despite our growing understanding, his work has still held up. Despite that, very few of the things that Isaac Newton came up with have been proven either false or completely false. So some of the things that he was wrong about, it's not always, they weren't completely false. He had the right idea, it just wasn't the right explanation. Here are some Isaac Newton quotes. What we know is a drop, and what we don't know is an ocean, which is still true today. There's still an ocean of information we don't truly understand, and that's why science is still necessary. And no great discovery was ever made without a bold guess, which is what we teach kids, right? You have to have a hypothesis, which is an educated guess, and you can't discover anything new if you're not willing to be wrong. So Isaac Newton, very quotable, very scientific. Thank you so much for watching this scientific biography about Isaac Newton. Like I always say, please subscribe, ring the bell, like the video, and drop a comment if you want to learn about somebody else or something else. I'm always willing to branch out and try to help people learn what they need to learn. So if you have something you need to learn about, comment in the video, and I'll make sure to make that next. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.